1600s, Scotland was desperate. The country was poor, politically weak, and locked out of the enormous colonial trade networks that were making England, Spain, and the Dutch Republic incredibly rich. Scottish merchants believed there was only one way to survive: build an empire. And so, in 1698, Scotland launched one of the most ambitious colonial projects in European history: a settlement on the narrow strip of land connecting North and South America, the Darien Gap. The plan was simple: control trade between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and Scotland could become one of the richest nations on Earth. Instead, the project collapsed into disease, starvation, jungle warfare, and economic ruin. Thousands died, nearly a quarter of Scotland's wealth vanished, and within a few years, Scotland would lose its independence entirely. This is the story of the Darien Disaster. In the late 1600s, Scotland was desperate. The country was poor, politically weak, and locked out of the enormous colonial trade networks that were making England, Spain, and the Dutch Republic incredibly rich. Scottish merchants believed there was only one way to survive: build an empire. But Scotland had almost nothing. Years of famine and economic hardship had devastated the country. Many Scottish nobles and merchants believed colonial expansion was the only path forward. Then came a bold idea: a Scottish trading colony in Panama. The colony would sit at the narrowest point between two oceans. Goods from Asia and the Pacific could cross overland and reach Europe far faster than traditional routes. If successful, Scotland could dominate global trade. Investors became obsessed with the project. People poured money into it: merchants, landowners, ordinary citizens. Some estimates suggest nearly half the liquid wealth in Scotland became tied to the scheme. The country was gambling everything. In July 1698, 5 ships sailed from Scotland carrying around 1,200 settlers. Many believed they were sailing toward unimaginable riches. Instead, they were heading toward disaster. The journey across the Atlantic was brutal. Food spoiled, disease spread on board, and tensions among the colonists quickly emerged. But the worst was still ahead. When the settlers finally arrived in Darien, they discovered a nightmare. The jungle was suffocating. The heat was relentless. Mosquitoes carried deadly tropical diseases the Scots had no immunity against. Malaria and dysentery spread rapidly. Food supplies rotted in the humidity. The land was difficult to farm. And despite the grand vision of global trade, almost no trading ships arrived. The colony was isolated, weak, and slowly dying. Within months, the settlement began to collapse. Men too weak to stand lay dying in overcrowded huts. Bodies were buried in shallow graves beside the jungle. Some settlers reportedly became so desperate they searched for scraps of food among the dead. Then came another problem: Spain. The Spanish Empire considered the region part of its territory and viewed the Scottish colony as an invasion. Spanish forces began preparing to attack, but by this point, many of the colonists were already starving or sick. The dream of a Scottish empire had become a fight for survival. Eventually, the remaining settlers abandoned the colony entirely. The survivors boarded ships and attempted to return home. Many died before ever reaching Scotland. But unbelievably, the disaster was not over. A second group of Scottish settlers sailed to Darien, unaware the first colony had already failed. They arrived to find ruins, disease, and chaos. Soon, Spanish forces surrounded the settlement. After months of suffering, the Scots surrendered. The Darien Scheme was finished. The financial consequences were catastrophic. Investors lost fortunes. Entire families were ruined. The Scottish economy entered crisis. For many in Scotland's ruling class, there was now only one realistic solution: union with England. England offered financial compensation to cover many Darien losses through what became known as the Equivalent. In 1707, the Acts of Union officially united Scotland and England into Great Britain. To some, the union was economic survival. To others, it was a betrayal forced upon a bankrupt nation. Even centuries later, the Darien Disaster remains one of the most controversial events in Scottish history, a story of ambition, greed, miscalculation, and the colonial dream that destroyed a nation's independence. The Darien colony existed for less than 2 years, but its failure changed the course of British history forever. What began as Scotland's attempt to become a global empire instead helped create the United Kingdom itself. And deep within the jungles of Panama, the ruins of that dream still remain.